Hi there, I'm Deborah Corey, and I'm the co-author of Build It, a Rebel Playbook for World-Class Employee Engagement. And I'm here with Shireen Daniels from Cafe Nero. You're the head of HR.
Correct.
Yes, for a fantastic coffee chain, which
Thank you.
I do love. And we're going to do something a bit rebellious today. So normally in these conversations, I talk more about the action, so what rebellious actions people take. Today we're going to talk more about rebellious thoughts.
Okay.
And then maybe about what we can do next from an action, because I know you're at the beginning of your journey. Yes. But maybe just introduce your company, if you wouldn't mind.
That's all right. So as you said, head of HR for Cafe Nero. So we have over 600 stores in the UK. We are international and we've got some in 7 other territories. But predominantly we are a UK business started by an American who fell in love with Italian coffee.
American Italian in the UK.
Correct.
Sounds like a movie.
Correct.
Just waiting
It does.
to
It's like
happen.
a romance
Yes,
movie
yes.
somehow, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, and we have just under 5,000 employees all across the UK, varying nationalities, and we do amazing coffee.
Yes, you definitely do. Great. So we're going to talk about, and it was very eye-opening for me, and I'm sure it'll be for the people who watch this, the difference between cultural fit and belonging,
Yes.
which I hadn't really thought of that before. So maybe would you mind telling the story that you said at the beginning? So I just listened to Shireen do a presentation and basically chased after you afterwards to say, could you speak? Would you mind telling us that lovely story about what it means to you?
Yeah, so I talked about the fact that for me, this idea of belonging. So belonging is just where you feel like you are connected and you are appreciated and your presence is felt when you're not around. So that's what belonging means for me. And my journey started from kind of a young age when I was at school. And where I grew up, in Crewe, famous for 2 things, the railway station and Crewe Alex football station, in case anybody's interested.
I've never been, so I will go now. Yes.
You probably don't need to, just take my word, it's fine. And there's probably one of a handful of black families in the town, so everyone assumed we were all related for a start. So I was very conscious of being different because of the colour of my skin. Also, it didn't help. I was very tall for a very long time before the boys caught up. But so I was
I didn't have that problem.
Yeah,
you can tell me about that another day.
So absolutely. And so I was always conscious of being different. And throughout my teenage years, actually, I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to stand out. I just wanted to fit in. So for a long time, I wanted to be like everybody else. And it's only as I progressed through my professional life and obviously got into HR and flipped it from a slightly different perspective. So yes, there's a bit about me and my personal journey, but also from a HR professional perspective, this idea of belonging versus fit is where I started to look at actually the distinction and where I thought there were examples in my previous experience of belonging. I probably think it was more about I just fitted in. I'm not sure I was actually myself. So in the talk I did today, I talked about belonging is that when you really want to be somewhere and they really want you to be there. But fit is when you really want to be there, but they're kind of apathetic as to whether you're there. So if you're there, great. If you're not there, okay. And the world still keeps turning. And if I belong, I get to be me. But to fit in, I have to be like you. And that's this whole, and there is a distinction that clearly a lot of us hadn't really thought about, which is why I think that clearly resonated with the people that were listening.
I was just going to say that when you were talking about it, I could almost visualize that fit is a square box.
Correct, yeah.
And belonging is different shapes, whatever shape
Absolutely,
you are.
and moving. And I tried hopefully to convey and to articulate this idea of, I'm not saying that when you're different, it's not you can't grow and you can't change, but that should be a natural evolution and that should be a conscious decision because you want to, not because you have to. And I think a lot of the time from a professional point of view, if we reflect back over our careers, we've probably worked in organisations where we thought we belonged, but actually what we did is we moulded ourselves to fit what we thought they wanted us to be. And then we get to a point where actually we look in the mirror and we probably don't recognise who that person is anymore. And I don't know whether it's experience and maybe age or whatever that is, but I then started to think about that distinction between belonging and fit. And then from a HR and organisational perspective, we spend more time assessing for fit, because that means it's less work, because we can be quite passive.
And it's probably easier also.
Of course it is.
Yes, you take the little test and you fit or you don't fit.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And there's less onus and there's less impetus and there's less responsibility for us to think about, actually, how do we need to mould and shape our organisation to allow diverse people to just thrive, rather than only picking the people that we think fit in that box that you talked about. So that was kind of where I was coming from with this whole idea of belonging versus fit, I guess.
And even the evolution of, you know, we started out with diversity and now we've moved to diversity and inclusion. Do you think that's getting us closer to the whole concept of belonging?
I think it is, but I think it's still in what I call the safe ground. So I talked about the fact that a lot of organisations are doing their best to go after a diverse workforce, which is great. They're probably not working so hard to make people feel welcome when they get there, so there's still kind of work to be done on that. But the bit that I'm even more interested in is how diversity and inclusion manifests itself the more senior you are within an organisation, because actually I feel a lot of organisations that say they are diverse, when you look at the board, when you look at the next level down, that diversity is not manifested from a visual point of view. And then from having diverse people involved in key decision making, that's not represented either. So I almost say you lose your points. You don't get any points for that. I will
only get this rung of the ladder, yes.
Correct. I acknowledge you for at least attempting to start, but it's you know, and I guess I struggle with organisations that tout themselves as you know, we embrace everybody and we're super diverse, and then you look at the board and the board is exactly the same as it would have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. So you kind of go, okay, so help me understand, why has diversity stopped then, either the level below you or 2 levels below? And that conversation is very rarely had, because we're still focused on a numbers game and we want to look great and show our shareholders in the annual report, you know, here, look at our fabulous people and they've come from all over the place, and maybe we'll wheel out somebody in a wheelchair, and maybe we'll wheel, you know, and you kind of get into that, which, and everyone kind of goes, yeah, that's great, but...
Yeah. I also see it as a journey, and we were talking about that, and I know that you're just beginning your journey at your company, but from an HR perspective, it's almost like we put barriers up in how we operate and what we do. I read about Spotify just changed their policy in that instead of you having to take off Christmas or you having to take off Easter, you decide what kind of holidays, which to me encourages diversity.
Yeah.
What are the types of things that you think organizations need to do to go up your ladder of the diversity journey?
I think it's starting with, as we talked about, this idea of actually not just assessing people for fit, but actually looking at what we think our success criteria needs to be. And that's not about where we are today, that's about making sure that we can still trade. Right. You know, my background is retail and hospitality, so this idea of this idea of we might be here today, but actually we have a higher risk than maybe some other industries of not being here tomorrow. So I would like us to take more emphasis on individuals that can help us still succeed and be successful in an uncertain future. But that means some of those individuals might not fit the organisation as it is now, and that's the bit for me. And then as you start to think about, well, actually, how do we challenge ourselves with decision making, you know, and how does that work, and how involved or not involved? Who do we have as the key decision makers? Because if the key decision makers are people from the same background, broadly speaking, then you don't have broad decision making. You just have one individual multiplied by 5 or 6, which is the board, that happen to all have the same background. So where is the diversity and the inclusion from that perspective? And what we're saying to people is, yes, we will embrace your difference, but the more senior you go, that's not important to us. We'll just carry on doing what we've always done.
And innovation can only happen with diverse thoughts.
Correct.
And actually, when you were speaking, I wrote some notes to myself about that. It's not just giving the person a seat around the table, but it goes back to your belonging, giving them that voice. Because I've sat in organizations with a diverse workforce, but it's not encouraged, that collaboration of diverse thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, you know, from a customer point of view, our customers are diverse. So sometimes all I'm saying is actually we just want to make sure we mirror internally what we are serving externally. And I think sometimes we forget that. So it's almost like we take it for granted that we will take anybody's money, do you know what I mean, to kind of succeed as a business. And therefore we will look to all four corners. And if you think the effort that we put in when we want to go into new emerging markets, and the effort from a business development point of view, and you know, looking at the customer demographic, and we go to all this effort to kind of bring customers to us and to our brand. And I guess I would want us to see that same vivre for bringing employees to us, and also therefore helping them thrive and be successful. And I think sometimes in HR we are seen as the support functions, and we're not as bright and shiny as maybe marketing, as customer insights, etc. But we should have the same level of investment and focus as they do, because we're all trying to do the same things, which is help our businesses just succeed and be successful.
Definitely, and as you're talking about, that is so key to the business thriving and succeeding, each individual person. So where are you thinking of going next with this journey? So I love the idea. It sounds like we all need to go back, take a step back and think about what are we doing in our organizations and all of our different HR practices to make this shift from fit to belonging.
I think it's where we have opportunity is when it comes to our processes, when it comes to the systems, you know, the applicant tracking system that you're looking to get, the payroll system that you're looking to get, the onboarding system that you're looking to get, all of those things need to be looked at from a view of, is this just a process we're putting in because we want to make our lives easier? Or is this a process that we're putting in because actually we would like our employees to have an experience and we're trying to make it as a positive experience as possible? And then if that's the case, what are the unintended consequences of us putting in a system like this? And you know, I was really honest in the Q&A about the psychometric testing. And I think there's two people in my team are probably thinking, I can't believe she's told everybody that story. However, I was really honest and said, you know, we shot ourselves in the foot a little bit. And some of that comes from not having the forward thinking or taking the step back and going, actually, you know, if we put this in, what does this mean for, you know, and you could argue all sorts of testing. You put in psychometric testing, what does this mean for people who are dyslexic, right? You know, if you you do a new design of a store and there's no accessible entrances, what does that mean when you want to say as a business, we welcome everybody and we are inclusive? That doesn't match. So all of those things, it's not even from a HR perspective, it's your store formatting, it's your building, it's, you know, all of those things kind of come into play. And I think that's when you then start to go, actually, we are desperately trying to move towards a more inclusive environment for our customers and our teams as well.
I think you're right, we do it for customers. You know, as I said, I've been in retail also, and you're right, we think about the diversity of customers, and we need to do that more and more when it comes to our employees. And you're right, taking that step back and thinking about what the experience is. You know, in the book we talk about engagement. So what's the engagement with each individual person that you have? You know, do you have a learning platform that's going to work for someone? You know, I've got an attention span of about 10 minutes. So if you put me through an hour course, you're going to lose me. You know, someone else that wants technology. So I like that as a starting point.
And I just think even with the technology thing is a great example. And I think where I would see we're going in the future is having technology that enables individuals to tailor it to how they want to use it. Because, you know, I'm sure there's some amazing companies that invest in amazing technologies to do this, but the average company will take an off-the-shelf product and implement it. And you and I have to use it in exactly the same way, even though you and I have very different styles and very different expectations about how we want to interact with it. Which means I might be turning you on, but I'm turning me off. You know, and so that's where I would see, even from a technology perspective, and therefore everything else. How do we get to a point where people can interact with us as an organisation, as a HR team, as whatever, in a way that makes sense to them? Because that's inclusion.
It is, and I find it so refreshing because, you know, in the old days of HR, I specialize in rewards, and I had to make the decisions for everybody. What benefits do you want? What recognition programs do you want? What pay programs? And part of belonging is making those decisions yourself. And I love how technology is letting us put the decision making, you know, in the hands of employees. Some HR people, they get nervous about it. Me, I love it. Because I don't like making these critical decisions for my employees when they're the ones who need to decide some of those.
And also some leaders, I think, are very uncomfortable about giving away what they perceived as is the power to the teams, because you then get to, but what if they misuse it? And, you know, what if?
Yeah.
And also, you know, for them, there's a loss of control. And I would say, forget what you're losing and concentrate on what you're gaining.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
you're getting the trust, which is so important.
100%.
Trust your employees.
100%.
Yeah. And I joked with Glenn, who I wrote the book with, about the whole idea is that we create these rigorous rules and things for the 1% of our population who are going to abuse them.
Yeah.
And if we just start trusting the 99%, and that 1% is going to find a way to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So, no, it makes complete sense.
Yes.
So I look forward to talking to you.
We'll see.
You know, after the baby.
Yes.
After you've had your journey
Yes.
with making this shift in fit and
Yeah.
belonging and everything. So
Yeah.
we'll have to
Come
get
back.
together again and talk
Okay.
about this. I
Thank
hope
you.
you've been inspired. I've been very inspired.
Thank
And
you.
again, I know it's going to make me go back, think about what am I doing in my company and what can I do better. So
Yeah,
thank you for
lovely.
your rebellious thoughts.
Lovely. Nice to meet you.
You too.